And now a continuation of CHRONOMASTER by Roger ZELAZNY and Jane LINDSKOLD, as read by the Plurality Report. Chapter 11. The Jester re-entered the pocket universe of Aurans a few hours later. Nothing appeared to have changed. The worlds still sat unmoving in their orbits, the suns hung frozen in their dance. Fuel efficiency has improved, boss, the computer reported. Looks like your alterations are working fine. Thanks, Corda said. Tico, you tell Jester where to take us. Following Tico's instructions, the Jester landed in a section of desert that, from above, resembled a fragmented jigsaw puzzle. Jagged interruptions of black rock shot with mica glittered like a demon's wedding band in the sunlight. Cliffs and mesas interrupted the smooth golden sand.
Renee, I don't suppose you remember what I said about the name of my private starship, do you?
Tico began with his usual indirect approach. I remember that you named it the Whirlwind, Corda said, and that whirlwinds were a means of transportation on Aurans.
Allah has blessed you with a short memory, friend, Tico said with a smile. Whirlwinds are indeed a method of transportation on this planet. As I understand it, Sheikh Dwister wanted some of the conveniences of modern transportation without ruining the planet's Arabian Nights motif. Therefore, we have flying carpets, winged camels, and whirlwinds.
Miriam made a swirling gesture with her index finger. Special whirlwinds travel designated routes, usually between cities or major oases. Using one, travelers reach their goal within minutes rather than hours. Do you just walk into the wind? Corda asked, remembering his own unpleasant experience with the sandstorm on Magnetic North.
Yes and no. At the start of your journey, you purchase a ticket. Then you are given an amulet which protects you from the force of the wind. Without such an amulet, as many would-be fair jumper has found, the wind will batter you, sometimes even to death.
I bet I've guessed what this has to do with the world key, Jester said smugly. Tico grinned at her.
I am certain you have, imp of electricity, but your thought processes are as swift and as sure as the legs of a running gazelle.
Gee, Jester said. Boss, why don't you ever say such nice things? I might, Corda said, especially if you stopped calling me Sugar Pop. Hey, that's blackmail, Jester protested. Enough, Jess, Corda said sternly. Let Tico finish his story.
As Jester has guessed, the only way to the palace is to ride a specific whirlwind. And to ride this whirlwind, you need a special amulet. I have one, but we will need 2 more.
2? Arabu said.
I'm going with them, Father.
Oh. I'm going with them, Father, Miriam said firmly. But you must remain. Dwister's palace is a dangerous place.
And I am no longer young, Arabu finished sadly, and blind in addition.
I am certain that your blindness would not be a limitation, Corda said honestly. Miriam tells me that you have traveled all through Aurans into other universes as well. However, I would like Tico's help, and Miriam insists that she will not let him go without her.
Allah save us from a stubborn woman,
Tico said, with a fond glance at his wife. Miriam blushed, but did not budge from her position that she must go with them. I have a touch of the second sight, she said, and I believe that you will need me. Arabu turned his blind gaze on his daughter.
I will remain, for I do not see how I could be of much assistance. I have never been within the palace, nor have I any knowledge of universe design.
You will not be as useless as you seem to believe, Corda said. Thanks to the supplies in my ship, we will be able to carry about 8 hours of bottled time apiece. That should be enough, but if it isn't, we may not be able to return in time to recharge. You will be able to track us through Jester's PDA. If we fall into stasis, you must take the Jester and report for me to the Terran Regional Representative. Ereboo nodded.
And Jester will listen to my commands, even if I must tell her to abandon you?
She will, Corda said, aware that from the holopad Jester was glaring at him. Tico pushed a light pad into the center of the table and began to sketch a rough map.
I learned from my friend, from the Minister for International Affairs, that the extra amulets for the palace, Whirlwind, are stored in the caverns within these cliffs. In addition to ignorance, they have several protections.
He pointed to his map.
The first is the maze of the caverns itself. Twister has an enchantment set on them so that their appearance changes. Only after many visits can one learn the pattern. I have put what I remember on this map. We should each carry a copy.
I can make them, Jester offered. Tico continued.
The second defense is the Keter beasts that prowl the maze. The third is the siren crystals.
Siren crystals? Corda asked.
Singing crystals that make a music so sweet that the listener stands entranced, unaware of anything else.
Tico explained.
I heard one once when I came to investigate the caverns. The sound was nearly as lovely as Miriam's voice.
Miriam giggled. Tico, sometimes you are over-fulsome in your praise.
Not at all, my desert flower, he said, clasping her hand. I mean every word I say. Were it not that your voice is the sweetest sound in any universe to me, I should have been trapped. Sheik Twister would have been very angry with me when I was discovered in his secret place.
Corda tapped his chin thoughtfully. If we're careful to keep from awakening the crystals with our bottled time, we should be safe from their lure. Like everything else on Aurans, they should be under stasis. Keter beasts are ferocious, but stupid, Miriam said. They are also always hungry. I'll synthesize you some beastie biscuits, Jester said, along with the maps. How soon will you need them? As soon as possible, Corda said, rising from his seat. I'll go put on my sandals and hit the fresher. They entered the caverns through a narrow crack between two leaning rocks, which the wind had carved with mournful faces. Jester led the way, the mouth of her PDA open and a beam of clear light shining forth. The humans edged in after her. Scraping slightly against the rough edges of the stone, they came into the first chamber. Corda switched on his powerful flashlight so they could see the area and immediately took a step back. Watch it, he warned. There's a drop-off here. We're safe enough on this ledge, but this is no place for a wrong step. I see what you mean, boss, Jester said, sending her PDA out to look into the cavern. The cavern had been beautifully designed to look as though sometime in Aurans, built in geological past, a river had cut its way through the glittering limestone. What it had left was a fissure in the heart of the rock that soared above into blackness and below into echoing depths. Assorted hunks of rock, small in the titanic vastness of the chamber but each several meters across, interrupted the void, islands of stone whose roots were buried in the darkness below. From the ledge on which they stood, the trio could see that strung between the stone islands were thick cables of spider web. They glistened with a viscous fluid that occasionally released a pearlescent tear to drop into the darkness.
This cavern is somewhat changed from my last visit, Tico said, shining his own light about. Then the webs were not here, and there was a narrow ledge around the edge. If you knew it was there, you could creep along it to the tunnels on the other side.
Jester's PDA darted along the edges. I don't see anything at all, Tico. My personal radar agrees with the visual check. If there was a ledge, it has since been removed. The spider webs bode ill, Miriam said. Perhaps they were woven by some ordinary giant spider, but what if Sheik Dwister has sent Slive here before us? Corda decided he really didn't want to know about other types of giant spiders. Instead, he knelt and gently touched a strand of the web. Sticky, he said, and I don't think it's strong enough to carry us, even if I wanted to trust myself to it. He twanged the web more decisively than shone his light around the cavern. A spider would have come to see what was caught in its web, wouldn't it? He asked Tico and Miriam. Tico tugged at his beard. Perhaps, but not necessarily. Outrans has its share of magical beasts. A giant spider might be clever enough to watch from concealment. Slive would be, Miriam agreed with a shudder. Still, we do not wish to turn back. Are there any other ways in, Tico? Not that I know of, he admitted. Then we must find a way from what we have with us or waste time returning to the ship. A playful grin lit stars in her beautiful dark eyes, and she removed the pack she carried and drew a roll of fabric from within. I have accompanied my father on many trade missions and have learned to prepare. She took out the fabric and laid the flying carpet on the stone. Your vehicle awaits, my friends. Tico, please sit behind me. Renee, you sit behind him.
Did I not say that Miriam is as wise as she is lovely?
Tico exclaimed, taking his place on the carpet. You did indeed, Corda agreed with a small chuckle. Lady, we await. I'll take the high guard and let you know if any spiders are coming to jump you, Jester said cheerfully. My joy, Corda said softly as the carpet rose, knows no bounds. Thanks, Sugar Pop, Jester said. I appreciate you, too. Miriam steered the carpet over the webs and beneath the jagged ceiling. Although her passengers watched the shadows above and below with tense shoulders, nothing dropped to attack.
I'd almost feel better if something had attacked us, Tico said, as Miriam landed the carpet on the ledge on the other side. Now I have reason to suspect that Slive has indeed been sent to guard this place against us.
But how would it move in the stasis? Jester said. The same way we do, Corda said, waiting for Miriam to finish stowing the carpet. In a small corner of his mind, he admired how the tightly knotted weaving stowed away as if it had little more bulk than a beach towel. Sheik Dwister, or someone else, has outfitted it with bottled time. Tico held out a hand to Miriam.
Then we proceed with even more care than we planned. Perhaps it will run out of time before we do.
7.5 hours left, the PDA reported, anticipating Corda's request, and counting. Corda shone his light in front of him. 2 tunnels, each dark, each unmarked, interrupted the smooth rock wall. Which do we take, Tico? Tico frowned.
Left, I think. Left for the heart, since the love of my life stands at my side.
Is there no better reason to choose, my husband? Miriam asked, smiling in spite of herself.
No better, Tico admitted. If the caverns are as they were before, both tunnels will lead into the labyrinth. Neither is more direct than the other. We may as well choose our omens.
Corda stepped through the left entrance and motioned for the others to follow. Jess, he said, you take point, but don't get too far ahead. Remember that your bottled time will awaken anything, even on the fringes of its effect, so don't get too curious. Right, boss, she said. They walked for about 15 minutes in watchful silence. Paths branched off periodically, but Jester probed ahead. Her radar would reach only as far as the limits of her bottled time, but she spared them taking many dead ends. Boss, she reported, I've located a purplish glow leaking around the next bend. Any thoughts? That is the light of one of the siren crystals.
That is the light of one of the siren crystals, Tico said. They lure the unwary near with their light and beauty, then sing them into their doom.
Cover your ears, folks, Corda said. Jester, turn off your audio receptors, then go and see if there will be room for us to get around the crystal without taking it out of stasis. Her report marched across the inside of his shades. You can get around this one, boss, if you hug the right side of the path. I've checked and there are no spiders or other nasties in the rocks. Corda shared the information. Tico nodded and Miriam burrowed in her pack again and came out with a handful of earplugs. I had Jester fabricate these, she said, as soon as Tico mentioned the crystals. She said that they may not block all of the effects, since she didn't know how to block magical music, but they may help. Corda rubbed his forehead. I can't believe I overlooked such an obvious precaution. Thank you, ladies. The PDA bobbed over to grin in his face. Don't worry about it, boss. Miriam and I couldn't let you fellows get hurt. Who would we have to pick on? Tico grinned and began another paean to Miriam's beauty and wisdom. Sighing, Corda stuffed the plugs in his ears, interrupting comparisons to Cleopatra and the Queen of Sheba. The siren crystal stood about 5 feet high and was faceted much like a quartz crystal. Captivating violet light glowed from within, all the more striking against the darkness of the tunnel. Even knowing the danger, Corda found himself tempted to break off a chunk. It would make an elegant jewel to dangle from a woman's ear. He sighed, glad no one could hear him. Who did he have to give jewelry to? His one marriage had ended centuries ago. He didn't even know if his ex-wife was even alive. The PDA would look even sillier with an earring, and Tico, not him, should be thinking about hanging jewels from Miriam's shapely lobes to set soft fires within the ebon darkness of her flowing hair. Corda hurried his steps, wondering if some small part of the siren crystal effect was reaching him despite their precautions. Perhaps over time a faint aura of its magic had penetrated the crystal's surroundings. Not wanting to explain, he did not ask Tico and Miriam what, if anything, they had felt. Hopefully it would not matter. About 15 minutes later, after skirting several more siren crystals, the path they were following took them into another cavern. The ceiling and floor were lower than in the tunnels and interrupted by stalagmites and stalactites. A faint scent of dampness and musk permeated the still air. Tico rubbed his hands together happily.
We are on the right track now. On the other side of this chamber we should find the mystic lake of transport. Twister stores his amulets within the waters, for they help to preserve and strengthen the magic.
Boss! Jester interrupted suddenly. Movement from inside the cavern. Several somethings. Big. There's a bottled time glow with them. Corda set his light down on the wide beam to free his hands. He heard Miriam give a small shriek of terror. Killer beasts! Tico cursed.
I feared this when we did not meet any in the maze. Someone has brought them here to wait for us.
Corda knelt and began rifling through his pack to find the beastie biscuits Jester had made for them. Then he saw the first Keter beast and his hands fell still. His immediate impression was of a toadfish crossed with a Tyrannosaurus rex. The Keter beast was at least 9 feet in height, but it was so blocky that it gave the impression of being massive rather than tall. It was bipedal, balanced by a heavy tail. A huge head made up at least a third of its length. The head was dominated by a wide mouth full of teeth. Tiny eyes stared out of folds of mottled brown skin. Despite its bulk, it moved with a linebacker's solid grace. Corda felt certain that the only reason that it had not sprung on them before Jester could give warnings was that the stalagmites and stalactites impeded its progress slightly.
Jester, how many of them are there?
Tico yelled. I see 4, the PDA replied. Ugly in the front, uglier and uglier coming around the sides, and ugliest waiting by the exit into the next cavern. If it's any comfort, I think Old Ugliest is chained in place."
Corda rose, his handful of biscuits seeming rather small and insubstantial. He would need to make certain the creature's mouth was open when he tossed them. He couldn't risk that it would ignore the offering. From the corner of his eye, he could see that Miriam and Tico were similarly prepared. "Maybe we should just shoot them," he said, half in question. Tico shook his head.
"Unless you have a complete disintegration beam, it will do you little good. The vital organs are well protected within the body mass. Sheik Twister is one of the few hunters I know who can hit the vitals on a regular basis. Almost everyone else wounds the beast and makes it so insane with pain that it goes berserk."
"Oh," Corda said. Hoping that his arm remembered the reflexes he had honed while pitching Little League over 30 decades ago in Tennessee, he feinted toward the lead Keter beast. "Hey, Ugly!" he yelled. As he had hoped it would, it opened its mouth to roar at him. He pitched and his aim was true. 5 beastie biscuits soared into the Keter beast's gaping maw. 2 vanished down its gullet. The slimy tongue rippled as if tasting the others. Tico was readying himself to deal with the Keter beast approaching on the left. Miriam stood with her biscuits in hand, but she seemed less certain. Corda readied another handful of biscuits.
"Jess, what did you put in these?" "Dehydrated meat, meat juices, salt, Parmesan cheese, and a solid dose of soporific," the PDA answered. "Sounds good," Corda said. He tossed again, this time not aiming for the beast's mouth, but for the ground in front of it. He wanted it to slow down enough to let the soporific have a chance to knock it out. On his left, Tico was doing well enough with his Keter beast. Corda was turning to check Miriam when Jester's voice came through his private audio link. "Boss, Miriam is frozen up, and the beast is closing." Hoping that his beast would at least pause for its cookies, Corda spun and pitched the remainder of his available biscuits at the Keter beast on the right. Most of his pitch went wild, but one biscuit hit it solidly in a tiny eye. The beast paused to claw at its injury, and Corda dove in front of Miriam. The desert girl stood pale and terrified, her hands shaking, and a whimper. The desert girl stood pale and terrified, her hands shaking and a whimper escaping her pretty lips as she stared at the lumbering monstrosity. Hoping Tico would not be distracted from his own battle, Corda pulled Miriam's supply of biscuits from her limp fingers and, as if throwing a fastball, coiled up and bulleted them at the Keter beast. This time his aim was good. The biscuits hit the opening mouth at something like 30 miles per hour. The Keter beast grunted, squinted, shut its good eye, and swallowed. Corda tossed another biscuit in front of the slowing beast and watched as it squatted to scoop it up from the ground with its scrawny arms and stuff it into its mouth. Corda dared glance at his first opponent. The Keter beast had turned to follow him, but its lumbering progress had slowed. As Corda watched, it teetered to a halt, and with a tiny, pathetic keen, fell onto its side. Taking Miriam into his arms, Corda carried the terrified girl back to the tunnel entry. She did not protest, but cuddled into his arms as if afraid even to look. Behind him to the left, Corda heard a thud as Tico's beast went down, then another to the right.
"Allah be praised," Tico cried. "Allah and Jester both. We have defeated them."
Corda turned to see and realized that he still held trembling Miriam. His face reddened as he started to explain. Tico saved him the need by giving a sweeping bow and taking his wife into his own arms.
"My thanks, friend," he said huskily. "I saw you save my angel when fear transformed my tigress into a poor trembling rabbit. We will be forever grateful."
Corda smiled, hoping that Tico never knew just how desirable Corda found Miriam. He looked over at the 3 sleeping Keter beasts. "You see if you can get Miriam to come out of that," he said. "I'm going to remove the bottled time from the beasts before they come around again." Tico nodded in agreement. Each beast wore only a single flask, good for about an hour.
When Jester tested them, she reported that they still held at least half an hour.
Well, we have something of a reserve, Tico said, but I dislike what this bodes.
Corda snapped one of the extra units into his harness. I know. Someone activated these monsters about the time we penetrated the maze. I don't doubt that their supply would have been recharged if necessary. As Miriam accepted her extra unit, Corda noticed that she was no longer trembling. Her voice when she spoke was as dulcet and strong as ever.
Then we are being waited for, she said. This means that we do not dare to wait. We do not dare wait for time to run out on the last beast. Do we have any biscuits left?
Plenty, Corda assured her, digging into his pack. He decided not to tell her how close he had come to running out of his own available supply when he had been defending her. I had no idea how many of the beasts we would meet. Let me go ahead of you two and get rid of the Guardian. You can be backup. The chained Keter beast was easy enough to convince to eat its biscuits, but it fell partially blocking the tunnel entrance. Although her initial fear had been soothed somewhat by Tico, Miriam refused to climb over the beast. As it was too heavy to push, they solved the problem by having her lie down flat on the carpet and glide under the lintel. Corda and Tico clambered over the beast. The PDA, of course, flew. They walked down a narrow passage and emerged in a cavern lit by the glow of siren crystals. A huge, tranquil lake dominated the room. Its waters were a dark purple blue. Is this it? Corda asked. Tico nodded.
Yes, before us lies the lake of transport. Allah willing, we should gather the amulets swiftly.
A husky, whispery voice sounded within each of their heads. They looked almost as one to where a huge blonde tarantula was lowering itself from the shadowy recesses of the ceiling.
Allah may be willing,
said Slive,
but Twister is not, and therefore I am not. Come forward at your peril, for I will be your deaths.
Chapter 12. Stay back! Corda put out his arm to block Tico when the other man would have confronted the hated spider. You've already been bitten once. We can't risk you. Tico hesitated, but before he could argue, Corda had left him behind. He walked across the sandy cavern floor, the crunching of his sandals the loudest sound in that windless place. As he approached, he addressed Jester through his throat mic. Jess, see if you can find a way to cut that creature's line. If we can drop it into that drink, we should short out its bottled time. Right, Sugar Pop, she wrote across the reed line. The blonde tarantula swung slightly as it dropped a few feet lower. Corda could see its bottled time glowing green in a harness slung around its midsection.
You think you are the only clever one, human?
It hissed, the words as before coming directly into Corda's mind.
I see your little bee. I will sting it, but first a gift for you and the other humans.
Slive made a tossing gesture with one of its forelimbs. Instinctively, Corda leapt back, expecting a coil of sticky web. Instead, a chunk of violet crystal landed at his feet. A sweet song rang forth, filling Corda's ears. Immediately, he ceased to worry about Slive's presence. The blonde tarantula seemed no more a danger than a bauble hung on an Aylesfaith harp would be. In the periphery of his vision, he saw that Tico and Miriam were embracing, dancing slowly, and with careful steps to the music of the crystal. Idly he wondered if Slive had given them a crystal of their own, or if they had been close enough to share the sound of his. Corda smiled at their happiness. Nothing of loneliness or longing in the feeling. The singing of the crystal was so pretty. He hummed a few bars of the music. His hands rose to conduct the orchestra. There was applause. He was doing brilliantly, and he had never conducted before. The slightest motion of his little finger he gestured for the violins to soften. It was almost time for the glyphnod solo. He must shift the tempo to accommodate its more jazzy tones. A 1 and a 2 and a 3. Sugar Pop! What was that noise? Corda batted at the air around his ears. The glyphnod solo was coming. It would not do for him to be distracted. Sugar Pop, listen to me! How annoying! Corda motioned for the timpani to give a thunder roll. That effectively drowned out the noise and prepared the way elegantly for the glyphnod solo. Here came the first notes, saxy and cool. They made him want to tap his feet. Renee, Corda, pay attention to me, damn it. The spider is walking across the sand and will bite you if you don't do something right away. Don't expect me to do anything. I cut its thread, but it snared me in some silk and I can't move. Corda looked at the words with incomprehension. Then, like a lightning flash through his cerebral cortex, he understood their import. He forced his eyes open. When had he shut them? And saw that Slive was inches away from his leg and rearing back to bite. It took all of Corda's available attention to stumble back a few steps, but he succeeded in reeling far enough that the spider's bite struck the bare sand. While it spit out sand and gravel, Corda shook his head to clear it. The siren crystal was still within his bottled time, luring him back to conduct its imaginary orchestra. Hurriedly, he moved far enough to leave it singing to absent time. Slive was pursuing him again. Corda suspected he could not outrun the spider for long. When it grew weary of playing tag, all it needed to do was climb back to the ceiling and web him from there. Corda pretended to stumble, and when Slive, laughing nastily within Corda's mind, hurried up to sink his fangs into a temptingly exposed calf, Corda scooped up a double handful of sand and hit the spider in the face. While the blonde tarantula was temporarily blinded, Corda reached over and snapped loose the harness holding its bottled time. He rolled then so that Slive would no longer be within his own sphere, but he was not quite fast enough. The tarantula's fangs sank into his leg. Corda felt a burning sensation that spread from the wound and flowed through his veins and arteries along with his blood. With his last bit of focused strength, he kicked out and sent Slive flying. As soon as it left his bottled time, the spider hung suspended in the air. Afterward, Corda was never completely certain if he had indeed seen a chisel-featured, thin, rather British blonde man dressed as an Arab sheik appeared and plucked Slive out of mid-air. It might have been the first of the hallucinations, for they came on hard and fast as Slive's poison took possession of him. He was falling, or was it that he was rising? Each muscle in his body ached as they became separate entities, each agitating to pull away from the whole. With an effort that nearly finished him, Corda gathered the warring body into a whole. His head pounded, but his vision was clear enough that he could see the castle on the horizon. When Corda landed on the foam rubber doorstep, the thud jolted his bones, turning the marrow into peach jam. Some of it leaked out of his nose, and he wiped it away carefully. He had to look his best because the doorman, who looked like an extraordinarily fat wombat in a formal kimono lapped to the right, was coming to take him before Almighty God to be judged for the events of his life. Corda suspected that Almighty God wasn't going to be very happy with him. Hadn't he felt like a god when he created pocket universes and terraformed worlds? God most certainly wouldn't approve of such presumption. What might come next? Corda trying to use God's credit card or sleep in his bed? Almighty God's audience hall resembled an English pub. God was playing pool on a table covered in black velvet. When Corda got close enough to the table to see the balls, he discovered that they were suns and planets. The pockets were universes. Corda wondered if he had made any of them and if God approved of his artistry. Almighty God looked rather like Charlie Bell, floppy mustache and all. His nose, however, was pointed, and long whiskers curled up from the sides. The mustache hung down. God wore many hats: a silk top hat, a straw sombrero, a baseball cap turned backward, a tall fur Russian hat. A green eyeshade was pulled low on his forehead. When he looked at Korda, Korda saw that God had orange eyes and that they flared like suns going nova.
Einstein said that God doesn't play dice with the universe,
Almighty God said to Korda in a remarkably conversational tone.
So I don't anymore. I mean, who argues with Einstein? Pool isn't a much gentler game, but one cannot disappoint the fans. I guess you're here for judgment, aren't you?
Korda blinked. I think that I am.
As you wish,
Almighty God said.
But I'd rather play pool. Gets rather boring playing by myself. I mean, I'm perfect. Why should I practice?
Korda nodded rather weakly. A swarm of bees had appeared from somewhere and were stinging him. God did not appear to notice. He handed Korda a pool cue and a cube of chalk. The cue appeared to be a stiffened boa constrictor, but the chalk was just blue chalk. Almighty God was racking the balls in a triune Almighty God was racking the balls in a triune Godhead. Korda recognized old Terra, Mars, and Jupiter among the planets. There were the twin sons of Aurans and a couple of heavenly bodies he didn't recognize, including a planet shaped and painted like an Easter egg and another that looked like a faceted ruby.
I'll let you break and go first,
Almighty God said generously.
If I went first, you never get a shot. I'm perfect, you know.
I know, Korda said, lining up the cue ball, which looked just like Jester's PDA, for what he hoped would be a good break. As he drew back his arm to shoot, Almighty God said casually,
Why then do you feel a need to improve on my creation, Renee Korda? Didn't I do a good enough job the first time around?
Korda was trying to find an answer when the cue ball rose from the table and Jester's PDA floated in front of his face. Jester, he hissed. Get back there! I can't keep God waiting. Sugar Pop? Jester said. Are you hallucinating? Jester, Korda said sternly. Get back on the table. The PDA continued to float in front of him. From just out of sight, God spoke softly.
I'm still waiting for your answer, Renee Korda. Why did you improve on my perfect creation?
Korda snagged the PDA from the air and lined up his shot. Because it was there? He offered, and then he made the break, and the planets and suns spun across the table, and the pocket universes loomed from the corners and sides of the table. One rose larger than all the rest, and Korda realized that it was going to swallow him. He saw sand and rocks. It's Aurans, he muttered in surprise. Then he felt hands shaking him and cool water splashing across his brow. Sugar Pop, am I reaching you? Marched the words across the reed line in his glasses. Jester? He said, trying to sit up and realizing that his head was pillowed in Miriam's lap. I was playing pool with God. How did I get here? The PDA laughed. Boss, you were right here all along. Slive bit you, but I gave you the antidote. Are you feeling better? I feel strange, Korda answered, reluctantly removing his head from its soft rest. Very. Tico handed him a canteen of water.
The poison may still have some effect on you for 24 hours. Do you want to retreat to the Jester until we can wear it off? We have about 6 hours of bottled time left, as it stands.
Korda shook his head, regretted the gesture as it made him dizzy, but got to his feet despite his spinning head. No, we need to keep going. For some reason, Twister is not helping us even though we are trying to help Aurans. We need to keep moving before he can set up more obstacles.
Sheik Twister, Tico said, is not a very trusting man. He probably dislikes all we have learned about the workings of his universe and fears that we will learn more.
Is he likely to forgive us what we know? Korda asked.
No,
Tico answered. Then we must continue onward, Korda said. Perhaps if we reactivate Aurans, he will understand that we don't mean either him or his universe harm. Perhaps, Miriam said, rising and shaking the sand off of the folds of her trousers in what Korda found a distracting fashion. But no matter what Dwister fears, we owe the people who live here time. They are too vulnerable to looters or vandals equipped with bottled time if we leave them in stasis. Tico pointed to the purple lake of transport.
I have already drawn forth amulets for you and Miriam, Rene, but the lake may do us another service.
He poured the remaining water from his canteen into a cup and gave it to Corda, then carried the empty canteen to the lake and filled it.
The waters of the lake of transport, Tico explained, when drunk, give the power of teleportation. The drinker concentrates on where he or she wishes to go, and then, if the wish is strong enough, is carried there with the speed of thought.
Corda frowned. Why do people use whirlwinds, winged camels, and all the rest to travel then? This seems much more efficient. Tico rose and sealed the canteen.
Because, good Rene, the wish must be both strong and precise. Many have been lost after drinking this water. Others have appeared in the wrong place. A few failed to appear at all. Sheik Dwister ruled in the dim past that the water should only be used for amulets and emergencies.
Reflecting that the dim past of Aurans couldn't be much more than 50 or 60 years, Corda nodded. Sometimes universes were designed with historical events as well as terrain features. Aurans was apparently one of these. Well, this is certainly an emergency, Corda said. Let's hope if we need it, the water works in stasis.
Let us hope, Miriam said, clinging to Tico's hand, that we do not need it at all.
Time's a-wastin', Jester reminded them. Let's find the whirlwind and get to the palace. Leaving the maze was simple, as Jester had recorded the correct route. Since Corda was still weak, they rode the flying carpet, keeping low and dismounting only to work around the larger clumps of siren crystals. Once they were outside, Tico instructed them to rub their amulets vigorously between thumb and forefinger.
This will summon the whirlwind, he explained. I believe it was also a small lesson in self-discipline from Sheik Dwister to his advisors. We were required to wear the amulets on a chain around our necks and keep them with us at all times so they could not be stolen. Of course, there were those who could not keep from toying with something that close to hand.
There must have been some rather startling incidents, Corda said, chuckling.
There were indeed, Tico said. Fortunately, I was not the source of any of them.
The PDA rose in the air. Boss, look! Due west! Something's coming! They all looked, and Tico said,
That is the whirlwind. Jester, I suggest you tuck your floating manifestation within one of Rene's pockets. Otherwise, you may be blown away or smashed.
In the wide loops, rather reminiscent of the approaching wind, the PDA descended. Corda undid the flaps on his tunic pocket. This should be safe, he said, motioning to her. Oh, Sugar Pop, Jester cooed softly. You're hiding me close to your heart. Unaccountably, Corda felt himself blushing. He covered his reaction by concentrating on getting to his feet. The medication Jester had given him had nearly countered the poison, but he still felt a bit woozy. The whirlwind that arrived was neatly self-contained compared to the sandstorm at Magnetic North. Its purposeful approach left no doubt that it was what Tico had summoned, but Corda found himself surreptitiously wiping sweaty palms on his trouser legs. How does it work? He asked. I don't see any seats. Miriam answered him. If this is anything like the more usual whirlwinds, we simply walk into the spiral. It picks us up and catches us within its currents. We are driven into the eye of the storm where, as with the sandstorm at Magnetic North, the air is still and breathing as possible. Then it carries us to our destination. Where is the palace anyway? Corda asked. I've been meaning to ask ever since I used my direction finder in the area and found that it kept pointing directly to the mirage. Your direction finder was not as wrong as it might have seemed.
Your direction finder was not as wrong as it might have seemed, Tico said.
He was flailing his arms as he spoke, guiding the whirlwind.
Dwister's palace is within a mile or so of the mirage. He felt that no one would look for it where it was not. The enchantment of Aurans are such that weapons of destruction like bombs will not function here. The physics do not permit it. Therefore, the palace was safest hidden in plain sight.
Sheik Dwister, Corda said, watching as the whirlwind, twirling like a dancer on one toe, spun to a halt in front of them. is a very clever man. I wonder what he is afraid of."
"Let us hope,"
Tico said as he gestured for them to follow him into the whirlwind,
"that we do not find out. If we do, I suspect we will not live lest we share that information."
"The wind waits," Miriam said, wrapping all of her face but for her lustrous eyes in a silk scarf. "Let us go." Using a handkerchief, Corda imitated her and was glad that he had. The whirlwind was less punishing than the sandstorm had been, but he was glad for the protection. He followed Miriam's gently swaying form into the eye of the storm and found that the centrifugal force held him comfortably in place. "This reminds me of an amusement park ride I went on when I was a teenager," he commented, reflecting that when he had been a teenager, not only had Tico and Miriam been unborn, but Aurens itself, for all its apparent age, had not yet been even design notes. Tico, who was holding Miriam's hand as they spun, smiled at Corda.
"I believe that you will find that, unlike an amusement park ride, this will not even leave you dizzy. There are enchantments against it. Sheik Twister could not have his counselors reeling like drunken fools whenever they arrived in his court."
"I am glad for that," Corda said. "Almighty God is still showing a disconcerting tendency to play pool in my brain. I don't think I could handle dizziness." The whirlwind came to a halt in a tiled courtyard. It spun in place for a moment, but when Corda would have begun to push his way out, Tico made a restraining gesture.
"Wait, René!"
Corda leaned back into the spinning sand and watched as the spiral began shedding its mass layer by layer. The process neatly lowered their feet even with the courtyard, and when the final veil of sand dissipated, they were standing on a small dune.
"When we depart the arrival area," Tico explained, "the whirlwind will reform and go to join the others in the desert near the palace. There it will become a hazard to those who would invade Twister's privacy while it awaits another summons."
Corda brushed sand from his hair with his fingertips. "It would if there were time in Aurens, but I fear that when we take our bottled time away, it will simply remain an inert pile of sand." 5 hours and 45 minutes of bottled time left, marched words across the reading line of his glasses. "And may I please come out of your pocket? The proximity of your beating heart is a thrill, but really I'm not much help here." Corda quickly unbuttoned his tunic, glad that Jester had not shared the last bit for public consumption. She was clearly picking up Tico's fondness for the well-turned flowery phrase. He wasn't certain how much of that he could take. The blushing alone was certain to raise his blood pressure.
"Welcome to the palace of Sheik Twister,"
Tico said, guiding them through a beautiful wrought iron gate worked with elegant arabesques.
"You see before you a place that few on Aurens have visited. Indeed, generations of families live and die without even one of their number walking these hallowed halls."
Miriam sniffed disdainfully.
"It is beautiful indeed, Tico, but I prefer your taste in decoration. I should not have approved of this place if Twister had brought me here."
"My desert rose,"
Tico murmured. Politely ignoring the flow of endearments between Tico and his bride, Corda walked a few steps ahead. He could not agree with Miriam's assessment of Sheik Twister's taste. If he was to set himself up as a desert sheik, this would be about how he would decorate. He suspected that Miriam's hatred for what Sheik Twister would have done to her made her unable to appreciate the beauty around her. From the arrival courtyard, they entered a broad plaza. It was unadorned except for the beauty of the flagstones themselves. These were rough, textured diamonds, cut just enough to glitter slightly in the light from the twin suns. Looming ahead was the onion-domed glory of the palace itself, covered all in beaten gold except for delicate hints of color in the enameled tiles that bordered the arched windows and doors. Nothing troubled them as they crossed the open space, and when they arrived before the main gate, it swung open in front of them. The outer environs of the palace were a series of courtyards set up as a classic Eastern bazaar. Here, unlike the hurly-burly of the bazaar of Palace Gate, the wares were all fit for a king. Frozen in stasis, a nomad chieftain held a string of racing camels. One, white as snow, bedecked with a tasseled harness of scarlet satin, was so beautiful that Corda longed to stroke it. To one side of the camel seller, a woman hawked silver trays holding crystalline fruit. Another vendor sold short, fat pottery bowls that might have seemed pedestrian, except for the elegant floral designs on which they were painted. A third had no obvious wares spread on his blanket, but his robes were embroidered with mystic symbols, and the stasis had caught him with his arms spread wide as he made a speech to a small group of men in palace livery. "If we are careful," Corda said, dragging his gaze from the colorful scene with some difficulty, "we should be able to cross the bazaar without awakening any of the others from stasis. This is not nearly as crowded as the public bazaar in Palace Gate."
"Nor should it be," Tico said. "This bazaar is almost more for show than for function. Sheik Twister liked the noise of genteel commerce, so this is arranged almost as a drama for his amusement. Some vendors, like the nomad chieftain with the camels, are probably newcomers. Others, like the magician to the side, belong to the palace staff."
They threaded their way through the bazaar with Jester's PDA in the lead, measuring tight spaces and advising them how best to get through. A few times their bottled time awoke a hawker from sleep for a moment, and a cry would break the stillness.
"Cool water, ice drinks in crystal cups. Fortunes and futures, destiny described."
Tico, what a pleasure to see you, my lord. May I offer you the choice of my jewels for the doe-eyed beauty at your side?
Tico looked tempted by the jewelry seller's offer, but Miriam dragged him along.
"I only wish to give you something fitting your loveliness," he protested.
"Later, Tico," Miriam laughed.
"I promise you I shall not always be so selfless, but we have a task before us."
Corda grinned. Despite his envy of Tico for having won Miriam even before Corda could have entered the race, he was warmed by their honest love for each other. Jester seemed to feel the same way, for he heard the softest of sighs from the PDA.
"They're just so sweet,"
she murmured, and for once he was not certain if the computer meant him to hear the words. Leaving the bazaar courtyards, they came into the palace proper. The entryway was a vast central foyer from which 3 corridors radiated. After the open bazaar, its roofed area seemed momentarily dark, but as his eyes adjusted, Corda could see that here Sheik Twister had chosen to display his wealth as well as his power. The tiled floors were polished to a shine as brilliant as any mirror. The walls were hung with shimmering rugs, any of which made their flying carpet seem coarse by comparison. Fluted columns supported the domed ceilings and delineated niches in which elegant sculptures and petal-thin pottery waited for admiration. Here also, for the first time, they saw guards. One stood before each corridor. They could have been identical triplets, and perhaps they were. Each was a burly man over 6 feet tall. They were clad in indigo blue trousers and turbans. Their matching vests were adorned with gold piping. They held their arms crossed at ease over their muscular chests, but each carried a scimitar unsheathed at his waist. "Well, boss," Jester asked, "which way do we go?" Corda shrugged and looked at Tico. "Any suggestions?" Tico shook his head.
"I know little of the interior of the palace, but I will share what I know. The corridor to the left leads to the areas in which Sheik Twister meets with his advisors. There is a bath there, several conference rooms, a banquet hall, and assorted gardens. I have heard that the central corridor leads to Sheik Twister's private chambers. The right corridor, I am fairly certain from seeing the Minister for Finance use it, leads to the treasury and supply areas. I, however, have never been there."
Corda took out his direction finder. "Perhaps this will be some help." He turned it on, and the glowing arrow immediately pointed down the central corridor. Corda shifted his own position several times just to make certain, but the arrow always reoriented on the central corridor. That helps," he said. "Tico, what do you know about the guards?"
That they are impossible to defeat in battle, Tico said ruefully. They are the natural-born triplet sons of a great sorcerer. The stories of their birth alone are near miraculous. Their father was the 7th son of a 7th son, their mother the 12th daughter of a 12th daughter. A dozenth daughter? Jester muttered. Oh boy. The triplets themselves were conceived under the moon of the 3rd month in the 3rd year of their parents' marriage, Tico continued. They were born in the 3rd hour of labor. Tico's voice grew soft. It is said that so that no one son would be born before another, the sorcerer cut open his wife's belly and delivered them all together. Their cords were cut in one stroke. Thus they all share impotent birth magic, which has been channeled since they could crawl into making them warriors. Corda frowned. I've designed enough magic for pocket universes to know I don't want to challenge these boys. Jester, can we fly the carpet over their heads? The PDA rose and took measurements. Too tight, boss. Even if you rode flat on your stomach, the radius of the bottled time would still reach the guard. Tico raised a hand for attention. We might be able to get past the leftmost guard. Our amulets mark us as invited guests, and the left corridor is one for which I have clearance. Although I have never seen one, perhaps there are cross corridors between the segments of the palace. That makes sense, Corda said. After all, Sheik Dwister would not want to make a public appearance every time he went to another area. Given what you have said about his distrust, secret passages seem a given. I only hope he doesn't just use sorcery to get around. Tico shook his head. I doubt that he does. Magic can be diverted. I am certain he would not want to rely on it exclusively. Now, stand behind me and follow my lead. Striding forward, Tico waited until his bottled time had awakened the guard. The guard bowed from the waist and did not reach for his sword. Corda figured that was a good start. Hassan, Tico said, his tones firm and authoritative. I am here with visitors for an audience requested by Sheik Dwister. Hassan now drew his sword. I must see their amulets of transport. Aristocratically, Tico gestured for them to pull out their amulets. Wordlessly, as if cowed by the grandeur of the palace, and, to be honest, Corda was rather overwhelmed by the subtle aura of menace the guard radiated, they pulled out their amulets. After examining the amulets closely, Hassan studied both Corda and Miriam as if memorizing every feature before he let them pass. Remember, he said as he watched them walk by him, my sword is sharper than shaving steel, and my blows as solid as the kick of a camel. If any of you betray my lord, I shall winnow you like grain and leave your blood to water the sand. Miriam shuddered and hurried her steps. Tico stood protectively between Hassan and his allies until they were safely down the corridor. I will remember your words, Tico promised. He let Hassan retake his guard post and then hastened away so that the stasis would reclaim the fearsome warrior. Corda and Jester took point as they headed down the corridor. The PDA scanned the walls, searching for an echo that would betray the presence of a secret passage. The first room they came to, Tico called a conference room, but it was unlike the practical rooms Corda was accustomed to in Universe Prime. Huge cushions were scattered on the carpeted floor. Low tables held not only pen and paper, but beaten brass carafes for coffee or tea and blown glass hookahs. The air was scented with incense from discreetly hidden burners. I see that Sheik Dwister did not believe that meetings need to be uncomfortable and boring, Corda said, sniffing the contents of one hookah. Uncomfortable, no, Tico said with his white-toothed smile. But most meetings contain an element of boredom. I believe it is part of their role in the divine plan. The PDA sped over to Corda. Nothing here, boss. The next room was a bath. Potted palm trees shaded an enormous square pool of heated water. The mosaic at the bottom of the pool bore Dwister's face. He looked so much like Lawrence of Arabia that Corda wondered if he had submitted to plastic surgery to gain the resemblance.
Possibly he had always looked that way and his appearance had been the root of his obsession. Corda doubted he would ever know. He was still musing over the implications of appearance on personality when Jester gave a squeal of satisfaction. "Found something, Jess?" "It's good news and bad news, boss," she reported. "There is a passage here, but I think it's the drain tunnel for the pool rather than a secret entry. Still, it might do in a pinch. It seems to be wide enough for you three." "Map it," Corda ordered, "and we'll keep looking." The next several rooms offered nothing more. In the banquet hall, they grabbed bread and cheese to eat while they searched. "The direction finder still says the world key is toward the center of the palace," Corda said. "Center and possibly subterranean."
"I know of no underground rooms," Tico said. "If they exist, they were not common knowledge."
In a courtyard off the banquet hall, Jester located another passage.
"This one goes in the right direction," she reported. "It's taller too, like it was made for humans to walk upright in. There's just one problem."
"What?" Corda said sharply.
"I detect several large life forms. I can't be absolutely certain, but I think they are probably Keter beasts. My suspicion is that the corridor opens out enough to give them room to move, but not enough that anyone could get by without dealing with them."
Corda checked his supplies. "I still have some of your biscuits. I think this is the route to take. Tico? Miriam?"
"We're with you,"
Tico said. Miriam had paled somewhat, but she nodded bravely. Clearly she was not happy about facing the monsters again, but she was not going to back off either. "We have less than 3 hours," Corda reported, checking the readout inside his shades. "Jester, how do we open the secret corridor?" The PDA flew to hover in front of a wall tiled paint. The PDA flew to hover in front of a wall tiled painted with a winged camel. "Press this, then the one to the right, the one to the left, and back to this again. The door will slide open." "Go first with your flashlight so my hands will be free," Corda ordered. "I'll follow with the biscuits." "Aye, aye, Captain," Jester said, flicking on her light. Corda pressed the tiles as he had been directed. The wall slid back and he was facing a dark corridor. The air smelled strongly of Keter beast, and at the fringes of Jester's light he could see lumbering motion. Miriam called softly, "Be careful, Renee." He nodded, but for once his attention could not be distracted by the lovely woman. Hefting a handful of Jester's biscuits, he strode to confront the Keter beasts. "They've been outfitted with bottled time, boss," came the words across his read line. "I can see the glow." "Thanks for the warning, Jess," he murmured into his throat mic. He progressed steadily, knowing that he must have a clear shot, at least for the first beast. After that, the scent of the biscuits might raise some hunger reaction in the others. He already suspected that Sheik Twister did not feed his pets well. When he could see the white of the first beast's teeth, he tossed the biscuits and then jumped back. As before, the beast swallowed and then eagerly searched out and devoured the biscuits that Corda tossed onto the floor. 5 other Keter beasts were dispatched in this manner, and when the last had fallen asleep, the entire supply of biscuits carried by the 3 had been exhausted. Miriam was suppressing her fear of the beasts well this time. She helped Tico remove the bottled time and dole it out. This will give us each another hour," she said. "That's good," Jester responded, "because even with them, we're down to under 3 hours. Searching the palace took time we really didn't have to spare." Corda, meanwhile, had been probing the end of the tunnel. Ladder rungs had been built directly into the stone. Testing them, he climbed to the top, where the wall held a flat panel. "Jess, come take a look at this," he called. "I think this is another combination lock. Can you figure it out?" The PDA bobbed up next to him and pinged her radar over the works. "I've got it, boss," she said. "Slide the tiles until you assemble a representation of the Auran symbol. It will come open then." Corda set to work. "Any idea what's on the other side?" The PDA probed again. "A large room with life forms." "Keter beasts?" Miriam asked hesitantly. "No, I don't think so," Jester answered. "They seem about human mass. Small human. If I were a guessing type of computer, I'd guess that we're below the harem." Corda had the door puzzle about solved now. "The harem, eh?" He grinned at the PDA. Now Miriam could get a glimpse of the lifestyle she gave up when she decided to marry Tico. Tico laughed.
She can look, but she cannot change her mind, because she is my wife now.
I wouldn't change my mind, Tico, Miriam murmured. Not for anything in all the universes. Corda shoved open the trapdoor and found himself looking out of a round doorway concealed in the wall mosaic. Shoving a few enormous overstuffed pillows to one side, he took a better look at the room. It was long and roughly rectangular. The main items of furniture seemed to be pillows and carpets, but here and there were low tables. The latticed windows held caged birds, their songs frozen by stasis as their freedom had been taken to amuse Dwister's women. The women lounged on the pillows, all scantily clad in halter tops and semi-transparent harem pants. Most stared blankly with bored expressions on their pretty faces or were sound asleep. Two were playing backgammon at one of the low tables. Another was standing bent over, combing long, fiery red hair that tumbled to the floor. A small group was studying a computer catalog that, as far as Corda could tell, displayed various jewelry fashions. "Boy," Jester said, "if we didn't know this room was in stasis, I'm not sure you could tell the difference." Absently, Corda hushed her. In the far corner of the room, he had seen a door opening and then shutting again. "Jester, go take a look." "No need.
No need, hissed a familiar voice within his head. It is I, Slive, and I escort my master, whom you have made very angry with your presumptuous behavior."
"Sheik Dwister!" cried Tico.
"Yes, that is right," replied the slim blond man who had now stepped into view at the center of the room. A few of the women had awakened as his bottled time touched them, but at the sight of the expression on his face, they had frozen in terrified silence. Sheik Dwister stood before them, clad as Corda had seen Lawrence of Arabia, clad in many famous photographs. He wore a white Arab headdress, its spotless linen bound with a braided cord. His robes were also spotless white, and at his waist he wore a curved scimitar in a discreetly jeweled sheath. One hand gripped the hilt of the scimitar, and Corda did not doubt that the ruler of Aurans meant to use it.
"Tico Higgins,"
Sheik Twister said. His voice was cold, his accents neat, upper-class British. Whoops.
"You have defied me and come to places where you are not welcome. You have defied me in other ways as well. You were told that I meant to have the woman at your side, the woman you have taken to wife."
Tico growled something low and angry in his throat, but the diplomat did not rise to taunts. Corda admired his forbearance, for the covetous, lustful gaze that Twister was now directing at Miriam made his own blood run hot in his veins.
"And you, Miriam, daughter of blind Arabu," Sheik Twister continued, his voice somehow becoming a lewd caress, "you are a foolish girl to defy me. Fortunately for you, I do not require intelligence in my women. Come to me now, and I shall spare you for my harem. Otherwise, I shall slay you with the others."
Miriam's only answer was to grip Tico's hand more firmly and spit,
"Never!"
Before Twister could address either Miriam or Tico further, Corda stepped forward. "Sheik Twister, you have opposed me through every step of my progress across your world. I ask you, why? You must know that I am here to help you, to restore time to your universe. Why do you not let me do so?" Twister's pale blue eyes narrowed as he gazed at Corda. Despite their prosaic humanity, there was something of the serpent sizing up the rabbit in that gaze.
"Renee Corda of Old Terra and elsewhere," he said. "Yes, I know why you have come. However, I prefer not to be a supplicant to any power or person."
"How could you be a supplicant if you didn't ask me to come here?" Corda asked. "I am the supplicant, for now I am begging you to let me do what I can to return time to the universe of Aurans."
"No," Sheik Twister said. "I do not grant you your request. You are nothing to me."
"Then let me do my job for the sake of the peoples of Aurans," Corda said. Until time is returned, they are at the mercy of any bandit with bottled time."
"No!" Twister said. They are mine to dispose of as I will, and I do not will to let them have time at this juncture.
Corda bent knee, though kneeling to this cruel man with the handsome face was one of the hardest things he had ever done. Sheik Twister, please let me help. Twister sneered down at him, his hand restless on his scimitar.
I think not, for if I accept your help, then I am still indebted to you.
He studied them one by one.
Instead, I shall slay you all and be done with this intrusion. I believe that Miriam shall die last, and in her widowhood she shall have a faint taste of the joys she might have had if she had not defied me. Then I will give her to Slive, and she will die in a nightmare's embrace. I would have already felt Nightmare's embrace, Miriam cried angrily. Nothing in your poisoned spider's bite could be worse than your touch.
Corda's mind raced. In moments, events would be beyond his ability to help. The three of them might be able to defeat Twister and Slive, but the Sheik could have means to bring the sorcerer-born warrior triplets to assist him. There must be something. Sheik Twister, he shouted, rising to his feet. As the one who married this couple, I must defend their marriage. Since you plan to kill me anyway, will you grant me the privilege of a duel?
Why? Twister drawled. Even if you win, your executions are a matter of certainty.
Because I will die with my honor intact, Corda said. Certainly you understand the demands of honor.
Honor is only an issue between equals, Sheik Twister said, and not a one of you is my equal.
Jester made a rude noise.
He's just scared that you'll beat him, Renee. He won't give you a chance. Old Twister's just a bully. He doesn't like it when he has to fight someone who's as tough as he is.
Twister grew pale and still. With a single graceful movement, he unsheathed his scimitar. For a moment, Corda thought that the Desert Sheik might simply slash his throat. Then Twister nodded once, curtly.
I will grant this duel. Women, clear us a space. Dead man, what is your weapon?
Corda knew that his best weapon was arrogance. He shrugged and smiled, hoping that his sneer was at least as good as Twister's. I'll fight with just what I have here, he said. I don't think I need more to clean your clock. Twister snarled. In his mind, Corda could hear the echoes of Slive's humorous laughter.
Very well,
Sheik Twister said, licking his lips with the tip of his tongue.
The rest of you stand back. I will slay this arrogant human quickly. It will whet my appetite for the game to follow.
Corda set his backpack on the floor and flexed his muscles. He could hear Tico and Miriam speaking to him, but he stilled his mind until everything was inconsequential except the man in front of him. Then came a single word.
Begin.